McGraw-Hill Audio presents Career Warfare, 10 Rules for Building a Successful Personal Brand and Fighting to Keep It. Written by David F. D'Alessandro with Michelle Owens. Read by Grover Gardner. Introduction. The real tests in business are never quite what you expect. Let me tell you about a decisive moment in my career. I was about 30 years old, and I was making my first presentation before the board of directors of the firm I now worked for. My company had recently been absorbed by this company, so I was completely new to management, an enslaved representative of a conquered nation. Yet it was up to me to lead the discussion of what the combined organization should now be named. I had spent weeks on this presentation because I'd never spoken in front of such a senior group of executives before. It was an intimidating audience. The chairman himself was straight from central casting. Let's call him Reggie. Reggie had all the CEO gestures down, including a little wave that he would give to dismiss you. People never quite walked next to him. They were always a step behind. And he never went anywhere without a group of malevolent-looking guys in tow who did his wet work for him. They sat around the conference table like a series of villains out of Dick Tracy. The CFO with a little sneer on his face, another looking as warm and friendly as a barracuda in big Coke bottle glasses. I took a deep breath and was about to begin when the chairman said to me, "Has she ever told you you're very Tertullian man?" I was stumped. I'd thought I was prepared. I knew everything, of course, except what really counted. The fact that these board meetings took place immediately following lunch, and that at lunch wine was always generously served. So by the time the meetings got underway, Reggie was relaxed and ready for some chocolate mints. He would sit in the boardroom with a box of after-eight dinner mints in front of him. Would he offer one to anyone else? No. He just put one after another on the roof of his mouth. As the square-shaped mint melted into the contours of his mouth and then slowly dripped into the back of his throat, the rest of the room would wait breathlessly for it to disappear. Because until it did, no one could understand a single word he said. In effect, he gave himself a speech impediment, and the meetings would take 3 times as long as they should have because of his mints, and everyone pretended not to notice. But I had never been to a board meeting before, so I had no idea how to proceed. "I'm sorry, sir," I said. "I didn't quite understand you." "Has she ever told you you're a very Tertullian man?" he said again. By this point, my boss and his buddies in the back of the room were struggling to stifle their laughter. But to me, this was a critical moment in my career. The chairman of the board was addressing me before I'd presented, and I didn't know what he was talking about. "Excuse me, sir," I said. Now he was starting to get mad, but I caught a break. A brief window suddenly appeared when one mint had melted away and he hadn't yet popped in another. "Has anyone ever told you," he said, practically shouting at me, "that you're a very attractive young man?" At this, my boss and some of the guys sitting in the peanut gallery practically fell off their chairs laughing. The Dick Tracy villains at the table, on the other hand, were pros at maintaining face. They suddenly found the reports that had been sitting in front of them for the entire luncheon, and those reports suddenly became fascinating reading. Wow! Armies of numbers marching across the pages. How gripping! As for me, I finally understood the individual words he was saying, and I was still sure I'd misheard him. "Pardon me?" I said once again. "For the last time," he said, so fed up with me that he was turning red, "has anyone ever told you that you're a very attractive young man?" I hesitated just a moment. I felt as if I were listening to an announcement from the emergency broadcast system. A siren was wailing in my head, and a voiceover said, "This is a test." I thought, this is a test, and not with the chairman because he's a lunatic. This is a test with the hitmen. Indeed, they looked as expectant as the attendees at a NASCAR event coolly anticipating a car crash. I knew it was important for me to play to them and not say something witless. Had anyone ever told me I was attractive? "Thank you very much," I said politely to the chairman, "but not in this kind of environment." Reggie seemed satisfied with my answer. Its effect on everyone else, though, was to really separate the men from the boys. The hitmen, leafing through their reports, knew better than to laugh at their leader. The board members, many of them quite elderly, were just happy to still have somewhere to wear their suits. The boys in the peanut gallery, on the other hand, absolutely collapsed with mirth. Strangled guffaws could be heard from the back of the room. As a presenter, I was destroyed. After the comedy that had preceded it, my presentation was completely anticlimactic, 15 or 20 minutes of white noise that was of zero interest to anyone. And at the end of the thing, the chairman said, "What about Fredrucker?" Once again, no one had a clue as to his meaning. When he finally cleared his mint, we learned that he and his wife had taken a trip to South Carolina the previous weekend and had seen a place called Fuddruckers. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "that name kind of stuck with me. Maybe we should think about buying this company called Fuddruckers and calling ourselves Fuddruckers." Now, we were a financial services company. We'd spent tens of thousands of dollars on research and hundreds of thousands of dollars on new designs, all in an attempt to come up with a dignified identity for our business. And the chairman thought we should call ourselves Fuddruckers. The meeting was over. By this time, I was ready to go home, sit in a warm bath, and slit my wrists. I thought this appearance in front of the board had been a career-destroying disaster. Actually, it hadn't been. My initial instincts had been right. This had been a very important test, one that I had passed. Sure, Reggie had been bizarre, but if I had reacted badly to him, it would have been my reputation that was crushed, not his. He had way too much power. His being bizarre was an accepted mode of operation, and eventually they'd be able to force him out. If I, however, had been impolite, or had appeared ruffled, or had been so rattled by him that I couldn't continue the presentation, it would have doomed my chances of rising within the organization, because the others would have seen me as unable to handle an adverse circumstance. Fortunately, I had kept my head, and for weeks afterwards people were congratulating me on how I'd handled the chairman. It turned out to be a tremendous shortcut for me. In the ordinary course of business, it might have taken me years even to make it onto the radar screen of this group of senior executives. But in 10 minutes, I went from being a faceless nobody to someone the henchmen knew, and knew not to trifle with. I had made more powerful friends in that one peculiar moment than I would have even thought possible. Here is the significant point. I went into that meeting thinking that it was the quality of my presentation that counted, and I came away from the experience understanding that it was how I'd handled myself that really mattered, because it gave me a reputation. I tell this story because this is how business really works. Most of us assume that if we follow our parents' advice, work hard, be polite, dress neatly, we will be given every opportunity to succeed. And these things are all necessary. They are the minimum daily requirements for any professional career, you might say. But by themselves, they will not set you apart from your peers, and they will not propel you into the executive suite. In fact, the biggest mistake you can make is to assume that organizations are rational, and that success will proceed in a rational manner from your good performance reviews, nice manners, and sharp suits. Organizations are not rational, any more than your average small town in Ohio is rational. Corporations are just vertical villages, as full of eccentricity, rashness, and pettiness as any dot on the map. Like small towns, they have a mayor, a planning board, and a town drunk. Like small towns, they are driven by gossip, intrigue, and anecdote. Just as no one can avoid developing a certain kind of fame in a small town, no one can avoid developing a certain kind of fame within an organization either. And, just as in a small town, the really juicy opportunities are usually doled out in a way that makes competitive bidding seem suspect. In other words, the jobs do not always go to those who look best on paper. So what really separates those who simply plod along through their careers from those who excel? In my experience, it's the name you make for yourself on Main Street. Everyone in organizational life is constantly being watched and evaluated by bosses, clients, vendors, peers, subordinates, and these people's significant others. Every day, with every bit of human interaction you engage in, some member of this crowd forms an opinion about you. The professional world is a very small place, and everybody talks. Your bosses talk, your clients talk, your vendors talk, your peers talk, and your subordinates talk. And the significant others really talk. They talk about you whether you're a lone salesperson with your own territory or the CEO at the top of the heap. Eventually, those thousands of opinions that are created by thousands of transactions will generate a kind of consensus about who you are. That consensus goes by many names. It is your reputation, public image, legend, or character. This is probably my bias as a marketer who has spent decades helping corporations build their reputations, but I like to think of it as a personal brand. But no matter what you call it, more than anything else, that collective opinion will determine whether you conquer the vertical village or are defeated by it. Don't believe me? Let's consider then how big promotions are really won. I've been in thousands of meetings in which someone's future was being decided. And it may shock you to learn that in these meetings there is no big chart where everyone is ranked by merit. It may also shock you to learn that the people who are in a position to actually do something about your career do not think about you all the time. I guarantee that they think about you only 0.1% of the time you spend thinking about yourself. Instead, decisions about your future are likely to be made in the most casual way, after a series of people, or even just one person, expresses an opinion about you. It's like a Rorschach test. Somebody flashes your name. What leaps to mind? Eats peanut butter and liverwurst for lunch? Or has a really unique vision for the business? Somebody will say, she's smart, but no one wants to work with her. Or, he's not a genius, but he's loyal and he knows how to motivate people. Or even, he came unglued at the board meeting last week when the chairman told him he was cute. And you will either get the opportunity you covet, or not. If you work until you're 65, there will be maybe 5 or 6 of these brief moments that will determine how well you are rewarded for your years of effort. The window of opportunity may be narrow, but what's at stake can change the course of your life forever. And an instant assessment of you in one of these moments means more to your career than a foot-high stack of performance appraisals in your personnel file. So you'd better be prepared. Yes, you'll have to have worked hard. That's a given. Yes, you'll have to have accomplished something tangible in order to be in the running for the job, the partnership, or the venture capital at all. Organizations respect measurable results, but it's how you get those results that gets you to the next level. The deciding factors, more often than not, are qualities that are not measurable but that are just as important to an organization as the numbers. I'm talking about personal qualities, such as honesty, or focus, or fearlessness, or a willingness to think boldly, or a gift for making work fun for the people you manage. In other words, it is the character that you've demonstrated over the course of 1,000 transactions that will shape your brand and prompt someone to take a chance on you, or not. Organizations care tremendously about character because they know that it has everything to do with someone's ability to get a job done well. They also know that if they elevate people whose integrity is spotty, or who lack the courage to make difficult decisions, the corporate brand may very well wind up suffering. In fact, the financial consequences of a key employee's loss of reputation can be devastating for an organization. Consider, for example, the Martha Stewart Imclone stock trading scandal. In 2002, news broke that Stewart was being investigated for alleged insider trading in the stock of the biotech firm Imclone, whose founder was one of her friends. Eventually, she was indicted on charges stemming from that investigation. Among the many corporate scandals of that moment, this one stood out for its purity. Stewart's Imclone trade had nothing to do with her own business, Martha Stewart living on the media. This was a purely reputational scandal. Nonetheless, the damage the scandal did to Stewart's personal brand quickly spread to her company's brand as well. The company's stock price fell more than 50% in the 2 months after news of the Imclone investigations broke, and earnings dropped sharply also. The slightest hint that Stewart was willing to cut corners in her personal life made investors, advertisers, and customers lose faith in her business. And not without reason. The list of great organizations brought down by the bad judgment of just a few individuals is long indeed. Smart organizations have always gone out of their way to look for employees with the kind of personal qualities that will enhance, not compromise, the company's reputation. Now, after watching the personal brands of the top executives of WorldCom, Tyco, Enron, and Adelphia turn to mud and drag down their corporations, even not-so-smart organizations have figured out that they cannot afford to hire and promote people of questionable repute. This means that the single most important thing you can do for your career is to lay the groundwork for an attractive personal reputation, so that the next time someone powerful does think of your name, that person thinks well of you. Of course, building a great personal brand is easier said than done. In fact, it is frequently a great battle. You have to constantly fight the indifference, hostility, cowardliness, and sometimes even mint-eating lunacy of the people with the power to move you forward or hold you back. You also have to combat your own worst impulses. It's easy to be sloppy and allow the dumb things you say at cocktail parties to influence your brand. It's also easy to be blind to the real moments of truth in a career and to blow them. It's easy to forget that good personal brands are usually built brick by brick and day by day, and that any transaction you have with anyone in a professional capacity has the potential to subtly alter your brand, for better or for worse. It's also easy to give in to the temptation to take a little shortcut now and then, only to find years down the road that this has cost you everything you've worked for. As hard as you have to fight to build a good brand, you often have to fight even harder to keep it. Generally, the greatest battles in a career are the battles you have with yourself as you struggle to give the world reasons only to judge you positively. I wrote this book to help ambitious people win those battles and build the kind of name for themselves that will allow them to rise to the level of their ambitions. This is a natural offshoot of my last book, Brand Warfare, in which I offered the basic rules for any corporation that was hoping to establish and build an attractive public personality. And like Brand Warfare, this book is not an academic treatise full of theories derived from scientific studies. Instead, this is the product of 30 years of business experience. The rules are my rules, and they have come out of years of observing, sometimes with admiration, and sometimes with stunned disbelief, how people hoping to succeed in organizational life really behave. Of course, you may very well be wondering whether I wrote this book because I have been infallible in managing my own personal brand. Definitely not. I have made my share of mistakes over the years and have generated my share of negative news stories. I hope that because I have shot myself in the foot a few times, I can offer you a fuller picture of the struggle to create and maintain a good reputation throughout a career. People also ask me how I have the time to write, given my day job as CEO of John Hancock Financial Services. I hate to disappoint any reader who believes that CEOs write every word of their own books themselves in longhand. Maybe some CEOs do, but I had help with this endeavor. The demands on my time were therefore reasonable. I might also have a few more free hours than most executives because I don't play golf, I don't serve on other for-profit corporate boards, and I don't belong to a rock band. Instead, I actually find it recreational to organize my ideas on a subject that I am interested in. Since I rose to the CEO's job after beginning my career in marketing and public relations, brand building is something I have given a great deal of thought to over the years. Fortunately, this is an interest that serves the interests of John Hancock very nicely. In addition, since my profits from both books are assigned to John Hancock, which in turn sends them to charities, I consider writing this book a good way to help raise money for good causes. Finally, I consider the audience for this book to also be a good cause. Good enough that I am willing to accept whatever criticism this work generates in order to give you the unsentimental truth about organizational life. I have seen too many otherwise talented and capable men and women squander their careers because they were too self-absorbed or arrogant, or failed to project the right personal qualities to people in power, or didn't understand how important it is to treat a receptionist well on any ordinary Monday morning. I don't like to see talent wasted, so I hope to convince you that you are building something important every day with everything you say and everything you do. It's the brand you make for yourself that determines whether you become mayor of the vertical village or the village idiot. I wrote this book to help you ensure that the brand you're stuck with is the one you'd give yourself if you had the choice. Rule 1. Try to look beyond your own navel. Any book about personal brands should, by rights, start with the greatest obstacle of all to building a good one, and that is the extreme self-absorption from which most of us suffer. In the Devil's Dictionary, Ambrose Bierce defines the word I this way. I is the first letter of the alphabet, the first word of the language, the first thought of the mind, the first object of affection. I is certainly the first consideration in organizational life. Most people's reaction to anything that happens in the outfit they work for is, what about me? Will this be good for me? For example, the company is suddenly engulfed in scandal. Your first thought is probably not, how will we get out of this mess? It's, am I in trouble? Or you'll hear that management is transferring a division to Arizona. Your immediate thought is not, will this be good for the business? It's, would I enjoy living in Scottsdale? Short of Mother Teresa, very few of us escape seeing the places where we work largely in terms of our own self-interest. However, to build the kind of personal brand that will help you to be successful, you will have to add another filter to the lens. You will have to turn this self-absorption into a desire for self-respect and the respect of the people around you. You may still be a navel-gazing egotist, but at least you'll be an egotist who recognizes the value of other people's approval. And in that case, before you say or do anything, you will have to consider whether the move will reflect well upon you. Will it enhance your reputation or tarnish it? Will you be proud of what you've said or done down the road? In other words, you have to view your own actions in the same way that the people judging you will view them. Don't flatter yourself. Unfortunately, it's not easy to adopt an external perspective on your own activities because such a perspective is extremely unnatural. In fact, social psychologists have documented a Grand Canyon-sized gulf between the way in which a person perpetrating an action explains his or her behavior and the way in which outside observers explain it. The actor tends to view the things he or she does as a reaction to external circumstances. For example, if you snap at somebody, you may say to yourself, I snapped at him only because he drove me to the breaking point. In addition, the actor is very much aware of his or her own intentions in performing an action, and is also aware of whether this type of behavior is normal for him or her. You may say to yourself, yes, I sounded snappish, but I didn't mean to. Or, yes, I did snap at him, but I'm usually a very easygoing person. Add it all up, and we tend to view our own activities in a very forgiving light. The dog ate the homework, so what could we do? People who happen to find themselves thrust into some kind of unpleasant spotlight often display this self-forgiving bias. An excellent example of self-forgiveness is Jeffrey Skilling, the former president of Enron. In February 2002, he testified before Congress about the company's collapse. When asked whether he had been aware of the partnership transactions that brought down the company, he blamed external circumstances for his lack of awareness to the point of absurdity. Why did he not hear his CFO promise board members that he would approve these questionable deals? Because the power went out. The room was dark, quite frankly, and people were walking in and out of the meeting, he said. To outside observers, on the other hand, the fact that the lights went out during one meeting was hardly material. The problem was Skilling himself, whom one congressman compared to Sergeant Schultz of the old TV show Hogan's Heroes, the bumbling Nazi who said, I see nothing, I hear nothing. The truth is that while we tend to view our own less-than-heroic actions as no reflection on the basic goodness of our character, outside observers believe just the opposite, that we do the things we do because of the kind of people we are. After all, they have far less information than we do about our actions. They have no idea that we met a dog on the way who ate our homework, or that we didn't really intend to have our homework be eaten, or that we've never had our homework eaten before. As far as the outside observer is concerned, particularly one who does not know us very well, we don't have our homework because we're the kind of unreliable person whose homework does get eaten. Social psychologists call this tendency of outside observers to assume that internal attributes are the cause of every action the fundamental attribution error. It may be an error of perception, but it is also a fact of life. Everything you do and say will be viewed by the people around you as evidence of who you are. Actually, this tendency to interpret other people's actions in terms of their basic character is extremely useful. It adds some sense of control and predictability to the chaotic world of human relations. Person A may decide whether person B is trustworthy based on very little information. But once A has labeled B, A has the comfort of knowing what to expect from B, and is able to adjust his or her own behavior accordingly. And once A's assessment of B becomes common wisdom within his or her organization, everybody in the office feels as if he or she is on solid ground with B as well. Person B now has a recognizable brand. Once, when I was young and in the public relations business, I witnessed an example of stunningly rapid brand building that immediately told my entire firm how to handle one of its clients. The client was a wine vintners group, and I was such a minor player at that point that it was my job to make sure that the head of the wine group and his wife were comfortable when they came to New York City. Since they were staying in an incredible suite at the Plaza, you'd think this would have been easy. But this was at a time when the domestic wine industry was still insecure regarding the French, and maybe as a result, this couple was imperious beyond belief. The guy behaved as if he had been born into the wine business as a Rothschild, instead of having been hired into it as the PR person for a trade organization. And his consort was worse. We were given a long list of her requirements. One of the things she insisted on was that there be no footprints on the carpet when they entered the hotel room. I'm not talking about dirt. I'm talking about indentations. Since we were constantly in their suite trying to provide the many amenities they demanded, we were endlessly calling housekeeping and persuading the poor, confused chambermaids to vacuum the plush carpet while walking backwards out of the room. The most specific of the wine woman's requirements involved the light she needed in the bathroom in order to properly apply her makeup. The sheet I received actually specified a setting on a light meter. So I dutifully went over there with a light meter, trying to figure out whether to add or subtract lamps and makeup mirrors. I guess I don't know how to read a light meter because there was not enough light in the room. Never mind that there was neither enough light nor enough makeup in all of Bloomingdale's to make this woman attractive. She caused a ruckus beyond belief because she had been handicapped in her makeup application, and she insisted that there be a reprimand. So I was yelled at by the higher-ups. The story spread like wildfire within my firm. Within a day, no one in that office who had any talent was willing to do anything for this client. The better people all said, "I won't work on the account." And they got away with it because they had choices. As I said, personal brands are definitely useful. For the really good employees, there was now one less client to worry about. Though the wine people were an extreme example, they were suffering from a disease that frequently holds people back in their working lives. What they saw when they looked in the mirror in no way corresponded to external reality. They thought they resembled Prince Rainier and Princess Grace of Monaco. We saw Nicolae and Elena Ceausescu of Romania, petty despots with no culture and a monstrous appetite for luxury. Of course, developing an accurate self-image is always a struggle. None of us is as benevolent, intelligent, or impressive as we believe, or, for that matter, as the people who want to flatter us would have us believe. But if you can't begin to look at yourself with some detachment, you will never be able to alter your behavior so that it corresponds to the kind of person you would ideally like to be. Instead, you will be moving from embarrassment to embarrassment, denying all the while that these embarrassments express anything significant about you. In fact, being able to peel back the layer of denial that keeps us from understanding our own behavior is such a huge advantage in professional life that I am all for acquiring that knowledge in any way you can. You can read great novels, or you can consult your wise Uncle Eddie. I'm a big believer in shrinks, good shrinks, not the kind that get employed by corporations, to give you insight into what motivates you to act the way you do. With any luck, they will also give you something else just as valuable, insight into why other people behave as bizarrely as they do. Above all, be aware that your behavior defines you. Since you are going to be judged not on your intentions and desires, but rather on your external actions, try not to develop tunnel vision. Consider things beyond your own self-interest, such as the well-being of the people you work with and the organization you work for. Get noticed. Once you have become self-aware enough to shape your behavior, Where do you go from there? Obviously, in order to establish a reputation with the powerful people in your organization, you first have to be noticed by them. Let me tell you about the first time.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?